Ma'am, can you pretend to be my mom? Mom, you pretend to men.
Let's all focus on our studies now, children. Pay attention to your work.
Love you, Papa.
Touchable CEO. He had built an empire before turning 35, real estate, tech, investments, but somewhere in the climb, he had lost the sound of laughter in his own home. His employees whispered about his brilliance, his perfection, and his isolation. No one dared to speak about the one thing that haunted him, the empty chair beside his 7-year-old daughter, Leela, at every school event. Leela was a quiet child with ocean gray eyes, just like her father's. But where his were cold and guarded, hers carried a softness that begged to be seen. Every morning, she waited for him in her tiny school uniform, clutching her backpack at the door, hoping he'd say, "I'll walk you to school today." But Ethan never did. His schedule was too tight, his meetings too important, his world controlled to let in the unpredictable chaos of childhood. That day, the chaos came knocking anyway. Ethan had been in a board meeting when his phone buzzed repeatedly. The screen flashed the school's number. He frowned, excused himself, and answered curtly, "Yes." The voice on the other end trembled. "Mr. Sterling, there's been an incident at school. Leela, she's fine, but she's refusing to go on stage for the rehearsal. She says she can't do it without her mom." For a long second, Ethan didn't speak. That single word, mom, hung heavy in the air, pressing against the wound he never let heal. Leela had been just 3 when her mother, Clara, died in an accident. He had buried his grief under deadlines and deals, pretending silence could protect them both. But now, that silence had turned into a wall that even his daughter couldn't climb. Within the hour, Ethan's black car pulled up to the small school auditorium. He walked inside impeccably dressed, tall, timid and completely out of place among colorful paper sets and giggling children. Teachers froze mid-step. Parents whispered. The sight of the cold CEO in a school play rehearsal felt unreal. And there, standing near the stage curtains, was Leela, her tiny face pale with tears, clutching her costume with trembling hands. When she saw him, her eyes widened in both surprise and disbelief. "Daddy," she whispered. He knelt down awkwardly, brushing a strand of hair from her face. "I came as soon as I could." "What happened?" Her lips quivered. I can't do the play, Daddy. The teacher said everyone's mom will come for dress rehearsal, but I don't have one." Her voice broke on that last word. Ethan's throat tightened. Around them, other mothers were adjusting dresses, fixing makeup, and hugging their children. And his little girl stood alone, looking smaller by the second. Before Ethan could respond, a soft voice spoke from behind. "Excuse me? Maybe I can help." He turned to see Maya Bennett, a new face in town, dressed simply but with kind, steady eyes. She was the school's part-time art teacher, still holding a box of props. "If you're all right with it," she said gently, "I could stand in for her mom during rehearsal, just to make her feel included." Ethan hesitated, unsure how to respond. But before he could speak, Leela's small hand reached out, gripping Maya's sleeve. Her voice was barely a whisper. It sliced through every layer of his pride. "Ma'am," she said, her eyes glistening with desperate hope, "can you pretend to be my mom for the school play?" The room went silent. Ethan froze, caught between heartbreak and something he hadn't felt in years, humility. The request wasn't meant for him, but it shattered him all the same. And as Maya knelt down to meet Lila's gaze, her gentle smile lit up the dull room. Something in Ethan's world began to shift. He didn't know it yet, but that whisper from his daughter was about to change everything: his heart, his home, and the way he saw love itself. The soft hum of the school auditorium faded as Maya knelt before Lila, her expression calm and warm, like sunlight breaking through clouds after a long storm. "Of course, sweetheart," she said softly, brushing a stray curl from Lila's cheek. "I'd be honored to pretend to be your mom." Lila's trembling lips curved into the first shy smile of the day. And Ethan, who rarely noticed warmth unless it came through an office thermostat, felt something stir in his chest. It wasn't just relief. It was something deeper, older, and painfully human. Watching Maya gently take his daughter's hand, he realized how long it had been since anyone had spoken to Lila with such tenderness. The rehearsal began again, and Maya stood near the side of the stage, whispering cues, fixing Lila's crooked crown, and cheering her on when she forgot her line. The other parents smiled, charmed by the sight. But Ethan just stood there, arms crossed, pretending to study the set design, when in truth, his eyes followed Maya. She was nothing like the women he met in his corporate circles. No designer clothes, no calculated smiles. Just a soft-spoken woman with paint-stained fingers and a kindness that filled the empty spaces in the room. For a moment, even he forgot, his phone buzzing in his pocket, the $500,000 deal waiting for his approval, the endless noise of his empire. When the rehearsal ended, Lila ran off to play with her classmates, her laughter echoing through the hall. Ethan turned to Maya, his tone polite but reserved. "Thank you for what you did." "I wasn't expecting," she smiled, cutting him off gently. "You don't have to thank me, Mr. Sterling. Every child deserves to feel like they belong, even if just for a play." Her words struck him harder than she realized. Even if just for a play. It reminded him of all the times Lila had quietly watched other families from afar, birthdays, parent days, school events, never complaining, just existing in the shadow of a father who didn't know how to show love anymore. As Maya began gathering the props, Ethan noticed a faint exhaustion on her face. "You're new here?" he asked. "Yes," she replied. "Moved last month. Teaching art part-time until I can get something stable. It's not much, but I love it." He nodded stiffly, his usual distance returning. "If you ever need assistance with," but she interrupted with a light laugh. "I'm not looking for help, Mr. Sterling. I'm just happy to be doing something meaningful." To laugh so unguarded, so unbothered by his power, startled him more than he cared to admit. Most people bent around his authority, but Maya didn't. She simply existed, grounded, unshaken. Then Lila came running back, holding Maya's hand and tugging gently. "Miss Maya, can you come again tomorrow? We're doing costumes, and I want you to be there, please." Ethan opened his mouth to say something, perhaps to stop her from imposing, but Maya's soft gaze met his before he could. "If it's all right with your dad, sweetheart." Lila turned those big, pleading eyes toward him, the same eyes that had once belonged to Clara, and Ethan felt his defenses crumble. "Yes," he said quietly. "It's all right." That night, as he tucked Lila into bed, she whispered, "Daddy, she made me feel like Mommy was watching me again." He froze in the doorway, his breath catching. When she finally drifted to sleep, Ethan stood there for a long while, watching her small chest rise and fall, his heart heavy with guilt and something else, hope, fragile and unfamiliar. Across town, Maya sat in her tiny apartment above a flower shop, replaying the day in her mind. There was something about that little girl's eyes that stayed with her, something lonely, something that reminded her of the child she once had to leave behind when life tore her world apart. Neither of them knew it yet, but this small act of kindness had just tied their fates together in ways none of them could have imagined. And as dawn approached, one thing was certain: Ethan Sterling's carefully constructed world was about to be shaken, not by a rival or a scandal, but by the simplest thing of all: love. The next afternoon arrived draped in sunlight and laughter. The schoolyard buzzed with energy as parents gathered with cameras. Teachers rehearsed lines, and children ran about in mismatched costumes. It was a world Ethan Sterling didn't belong to, but for once, he stayed. He stood near the back, silent, yet watching closely as his daughter giggled beside Maya, adjusting her fairy wings and whispering secrets only children and kind souls could understand. He couldn't remember the last time he'd seen Lila laugh so freely. The sight both comforted and unnerved him. It made him realize that despite all his wealth and effort, someone else, someone who barely knew them, had done more for his child in 2 days than he had in years. When the principal called for everyone's attention, the chaos hushed. Parents, she smiled. Before the big show tomorrow, we'll be doing a photo for the school bulletin. Children with their mothers, please come forward. Ethan felt his stomach tighten. He saw the hesitation in Lila's little body, her small hands fidgeting, her shoulders sinking. For a brief moment, he almost stepped forward to explain, to spare her the awkwardness. But before he could, Maya knelt again, just like yesterday, and whispered, "Shall we?" Lila's face brightened instantly. She ran into Maya's arms, wrapping them around her waist as the camera clicked. The flash went off, and in that single moment, the photo froze more than just an image. It captured something Ethan hadn't realized he'd lost: belonging. But not everyone smiled. Near the corner of the room stood a woman holding a clipboard, a school volunteer and gossip magnate named Karen Lowe, who always had an eye for scandal. Her eyes flickered between Maya and Ethan with something sharp and suspicious. By evening, whispers began spreading through the parent group chat. "Isn't that the CEO's new girlfriend? I heard she's just pretending to be the mother. How strange. He probably hired her." Maya had no idea of the rumors until she arrived the next morning to find other teachers whispering behind her back. She tried to ignore it, focusing on decorating the stage with paper stars. But the tension hung thick in the air when Ethan arrived later that afternoon to drop off Lila's lunch. He noticed it too: the stares, the forced smiles. He frowned and pulled the principal aside. "Is there a problem here?" The woman hesitated. "Mr. Sterling, I think it's just a talk. Some parents misunderstood the situation yesterday. They assumed Miss Bennett was involved with you." Tia, his jaw clenched. "That's absurd." "I agree," the principal said quickly. "But she's been taking it quietly. She doesn't want to make a scene." Ethan turned toward the auditorium, just in time to see Maya guiding the children through their dance steps. Despite the murmurs around her, she smiled, calm and patient. But he saw the flicker of discomfort in her eyes when she caught him watching. Later, as the hall emptied, he approached her. "You should have told me," he said. She shrugged lightly. "There's nothing to tell. I know how gossip works. It'll fade." "I can fix it," Ethan said firmly. "I'll make a statement. The school will know." Maya interrupted, her voice gentle but firm. "Don't. If you do, it'll only make it worse for Lila. Kids repeat what they hear at home." Her words silenced him. She wasn't thinking about her own reputation, alone his daughter's peace. And that, somehow, hurt him even more. He sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "You shouldn't have to deal with this because of me." She smiled faintly. "Maybe, but if it helped your little girl smile again, I'd do it twice." Something in him cracked open at that. There was no agenda in her tone, no trace of pity, just quiet sincerity, the kind he hadn't felt since Clara. But outside the window, unseen by them both, Karen stood again, snapping a photo through the glass. Ethan's usually private world was about to become a headline. And by tomorrow, the whispers would turn into something much louder, something that could ruin them both. By morning, the whispers had turned into wildfire. The city's gossip columns and online blogs had a new headline: "Untouchable CEO's Secret Scandal." Ethan Sterling seen with young teacher playing family at daughter's school. The photo Karen had taken Ethan standing near the stage while Maya knelt beside Lila. The little girl smiling up at her was splashed across every business blog and entertainment page within hours. The angle, the caption, the timing, it all told the wrong story. Ethan was in his office when his assistant rushed in, pale. "Sir, you might want to see this." The moment he looked at the screen, his expression hardened. A deep silence filled the room, colder than the glass walls surrounding them. His fingers clenched around the tablet as if crushing the rumors could make them disappear. "Who leaked this?" he demanded. "We're not sure yet," his assistant stammered. "But the press is calling. Investors are asking questions. Some are implying you might have used company resources too." "Enough." Ethan cut him off sharply. He turned away, staring at the city skyline, his reflection in the window suddenly foreign. He wasn't a man. He was a headline again. And the worst part wasn't the scandal, it was that Lila would see it too at that exact moment. Maya was in her small classroom, helping the children paint the final set pieces. Her phone buzzed repeatedly, notifications flooding in. She opened one message. She froze, her breath caught in her throat as she saw the photo, the cruel comments beneath it. "Gold digger, single dad drama. She's clearly using that kid for sympathy." Her hands trembled as she set the phone aside. The laughter of children in the background suddenly felt distant, muffled. A few fellow teachers entered quietly, offering awkward glances. One whispered, "Maya, maybe you should stay home for a few days." Her chest ached, not for herself, but for Lila. "The kids will hear this," she thought. She'd be teased, and she was right. By lunchtime, Lila sat alone at her table, staring at her sandwich, while two boys snickered nearby. "Your dad's girlfriend was on the news," one teased. "Did she buy you that fancy lunch?" Lila blinked hard, her lip trembling. "She's not my dad's girlfriend," she said softly. "She's just my teacher." But when the laughter didn't stop, she pushed her tray away and ran out of the cafeteria, tears streaking down her small face. That evening, Ethan arrived at school to pick her up early. He found her sitting on the bench outside, knees pulled to her chest, her voice barely a whisper. "Daddy, did I do something wrong?" His heart cracked open. "No, baby," he said, pulling her into his arms. "You didn't, but everyone's talking about Miss Maya." She sniffled. "They said you're gonna fire her." "Please don't. She didn't do anything bad. She was just trying to help me." Ethan's throat tightened. The irony wasn't lost on him. The woman who had brought light to his daughter's world was now being punished for it. That night, called Maya. She answered after a long pause, her voice quiet. "Mr. Sterling, maybe it's best if I step back from the play. The children don't need this attention," he said firmly. "You did nothing wrong. I'll handle it." But Maya's reply was heavy, resigned. "You can't handle gossip, Ethan. You can only outlast it. And I can't let your little girl be caught in the crossfire because of me." There was a long silence between them, so long that the sound of her soft breathing became the only proof she was still on the line. Finally, he whispered, "I don't want her to lose you too." The pain in his voice startled her. But before she could respond, she heard something new in the background. Lila's small sobs through the speaker. "It's calling out for him." "Go to her," Maya said gently. "She needs you more than ever." And just like that, the call ended, leaving Ethan alone in his vast, empty penthouse, staring at a photograph on his phone. It wasn't the one from the tabloids, it was the one the school had taken. The one where Maya knelt beside his daughter, both smiling like they belonged. But the next day, when he arrived at the school, Maya's classroom was empty. Her desk cleared, her nameplate gone, and Lila, standing beside him in the doorway, whispered, "Daddy, did Miss Maya leave because of us?" He couldn't answer. He didn't have the courage to admit that the world had driven away the only warmth they had found in years. The next morning, a strange stillness hung over the Sterling household. The breakfast table, usually silent but orderly, was now scattered with untouched toast and cold tea. Lila sat quietly, her school uniform wrinkled, her eyes swollen from crying through the night. Ethan had tried to reassure her that Miss Maya would come back, but even as he said the words, he knew they were a lie. When he dropped Lila off at school, her steps dragged. She glanced instinctively toward the art room, hoping, praying that familiar, soft voice would greet her. But the door was closed, the lights off, and the cheerful drawings pinned to the walls seemed dull without her presence. That afternoon, when Ethan returned to his office, his assistant handed him an envelope. "Sir, this came by courier this morning. No return address." He frowned and opened it. Inside was a single folded letter written in neat, slightly smudged handwriting. The first line stopped him cold. "Dear Mr. Sterling, if you're reading this, I've already resigned from the school. Please don't try to find me. I didn't want to leave without saying goodbye. But sometimes silence protects more than explanations do." He sank into his chair, his hands trembling slightly as he continued to read. "I never meant to bring trouble to you or your daughter. What happened wasn't your fault, nor mine. It was the world's tendency to misunderstand kindness. When Lila first asked me to pretend to be her mom, I saw something in her eyes I hadn't seen in a long time, pure longing. Not for luxury, not for attention, just love. She reminded me of someone I once knew. Years ago, I had a daughter. Her name was Ella. She was 7 chess like Lila. We were inseparable. But one winter, an illness took her faster than I could understand. I lost my purpose that day. Teaching art was the only way I could stay near the laughter of children without completely falling apart. When Lila held my hand and called me ma'am, I felt something shift. For a brief moment, it was as if life had given me a chance to love again, to heal what I thought would stay broken forever. Maybe that's why I didn't say no. Maybe that's why I cared more than I should have. But the rumors reminded me how cruel people can be to gentle things. So, before it hurts her or you anymore, I'm stepping away. Tell Lila I'm proud of her bravery. Tell her that pretending can sometimes make people believe in real love again." Maya Bennett, final words blurred before Ethan's eyes. He set the letter down slowly, pressing his hands against his face. For the first time in years, he didn't think about stocks or markets or deadlines, just about the gaping hole that had formed where something fragile and kind once stood. That evening, Lila found the letter on his desk. He hadn't meant for her to see it, but when she did, she read every line carefully. By the end, her tiny hands trembled. She had a daughter, she whispered. "Just like me." Ethan nodded softly. "Yes, and she cared about you very much." Lila looked up at him, her voice cracking. Then why did she have to go? He knelt beside her, struggling for words. Because sometimes people leave not because they want to, but because the world doesn't let them stay. That night, after Lila fell asleep, Ethan stood by her bedside, his mind replaying every moment Maya's steady eyes, her laughter, the way she made his daughter feel safe. He thought of all the walls he had built around himself, all the ways he had mistaken control for protection. He realized something profound then. Maya hadn't entered their lives by accident. She was the piece both he and Lila needed to remember what love looked like in its simplest form. The next morning, he made a decision. He cleared his calendar, canceled meetings, and walked his daughter to school for the first time in years. Parents stared, teachers whispered, but he didn't care. For once, he wasn't the CEO. They were just father and daughter. But as they reached the gate, Lila tugged on his sleeve and pointed. There, pinned to the school's notice board, was a new flyer, art exhibition dedicated to the children who see the world in color, organized by M. Bennett Studios. Ethan froze. M. Bennett. Lila's eyes widened with hope. "Daddy, do you think it's her?" His heart began to race. "I don't know," he said quietly, "but we're going to find out." And for the first time in a long time, Ethan Sterling smiled a real, unguarded smile, because somewhere, somehow, he knew fate wasn't finished with them yet. The exhibition was set for Saturday evening at a small community gallery tucked between a bookstore and a cafe in the quieter part of town. It wasn't the kind of place Ethan Sterling would normally step into. No press coverage, no flashing cameras, no elite guest list. But as he stood outside with Lila's hand clutching his, it felt like the most important door he'd ever opened the moment they entered. The scent of acrylic and varnish filled the air. The walls were lined with canvases that pulsed with emotion colors, blending like memories trying to hold on to form. Lila's small eyes darted from one painting to another, wonder lighting up her face. And then she stopped in front of one that made Ethan's breath catch in his throat. It was a portrait. A child, painted in tender brushstrokes, wearing a golden paper crown. Her smile was radiant, yet her eyes shimmered with melancholy. The title read, "The Girl Who Taught Me to Feel Again," Lila whispered. "That's me." Ethan stared, stunned. The resemblance was unmistakable. Her hair, her eyes, the same innocent tilt of her chin. The signature below the frame confirmed it. M. Bennett. Before he could process the surge of emotions flooding his chest, a familiar voice spoke behind him, soft, hesitant, trembling slightly. "I didn't think you'd come." He turned, and there she was. Maya. She stood in a simple cream dress, her hair tied back loosely, paint smudges still faint on her fingers. Her eyes met his for the first time in weak eyes that carried both apology and relief. For a moment, neither spoke. The noise of the gallery faded until it felt like time itself had paused. Lila broke the silence first, running forward. "Miss Maya." Maya dropped to her knees, arms opening instinctively as the little girl collided into her embrace. She held her tightly, her voice quivering. "Oh, sweetheart, I missed you so much." Lila pulled back, just enough to look into her eyes. "You promised you wouldn't disappear." "I didn't mean to," Maya whispered. "I just thought you'd be safer without me around." Ethan stepped closer, his voice low but steady. "You weren't the problem, Maya. The problem was that I didn't protect you when I should have." She looked up at him then, her gaze sharp with disbelief. "Ethan, you owe me no apology. I knew what people would think. I just didn't want Lila to carry the weight of their words." He shook his head. "You carried it for her. That's something I can never repay." There was a long silence. Around them, people moved through the gallery, admiring paintings, unaware of the quiet storm unfolding between three souls. Maya finally stood, glancing toward the portrait again. "That painting, it's not about me being her mother. It's about what she reminded me of. After my daughter passed, I stopped painting for years. I thought I'd forgotten how to feel joy. But Lilashi made me remember what love looks like when it's innocent and unguarded." Ethan swallowed hard. "And what about me? What did I make you remember?" Her lips curved in the faintest smile. "That even broken people can still protect something beautiful if they choose to." He looked at her, and for the first time since Clara's death, something inside him finally gave way. The armor he'd worn for years, the one built of control and silence, cracked wide open. "I don't want to protect from a distance anymore," he said softly. "I want to try. For Lila, for myself, maybe for you." Maya's eyes filled, and she took a small step closer. "Ethan, the world doesn't need you to be perfect. It just needs you to be real." And in that moment, for the first time, he was. They spent the rest of the evening together, Maya introducing them to her other paintings. Lila laughing again, her tiny hands tugging at theirs, making them both hold on tighter. The room, once cold and still, now glowed with quiet warmth. As they walked out of the gallery that night, the street lamps bathed them in soft golden light. Lila skipped ahead, humming her school plays tune, her paper crown perched slightly crooked. Maya smiled faintly. "She's special, Ethan. You should be proud." "I am," he said, glancing at her. "But I'm realizing something else too." She tilted her head. "What's that?" He looked straight at her, his tone gentle but resolute. "That may be. I don't want to keep pretending anymore." Maya froze, her breath catching, but before she could respond, Lila turned around, calling, "Come on. We're gonna be late for dinner." Ethan smiled. Looks like the Queen has spoken. They laughed softly, genuinely, as they followed her down the quiet street. But deep inside, both knew that this wasn't the end of their story. It was the beginning of something fragile, yet real. Something that would soon be tested by the world again. Because love, especially the kind, born from kindness, never arrives without its final test. The evening of the school play arrived with the kind of anticipation that made the air feel electric. The auditorium, once the source of whispers and rumors, was now filled with laughter, flowers, and the scent of fresh paint from the stage backdrop. Parents filled the seats, cameras poised, while the children fluttered about in glittering costumes. Ethan sat in the front row, Lila's tiny tiara glinting under the soft yellow lights as she peeked out from behind the curtain. He caught her eye and smiled, real one, open and proud. She grinned back and waved before vanishing into the backstage bustle. For once, the powerful CEO wasn't thinking about meetings or damage control. He was just a father, nervous, hopeful, humbled. Then the lights dimmed. The play began. It was a simple story about a lonely princess who longed for her mother's love, only to realize that love can come from unexpected places. As the scenes unfolded, Ethan couldn't help but notice how much of Leela's real life had seeped into the story. Every line, every gesture felt like a whisper from her little heart. And when Lila stepped onto the stage for her final monologue, the entire hall fell silent. Her soft voice trembled at first, but soon steadied with quiet grace. "My mommy couldn't come," she said, her eyes glimmering under the spotlight. "But someone else did. Someone who showed me that love isn't just about who you're born to. It's about who shows up when you need them." Her gaze shifted toward the audience and landed on Maya. Maya sat at the back, hidden in the crowd, her hands folded tightly on her lap. She hadn't planned to attend, but Leela's teacher had sent her an extra invitation. She had almost thrown it away, but something in her heart refused. Now, as she watched the little girl she'd come to love, tears blurred her vision. "And my daddy," Leela continued, looking toward Ethan. "He showed me that even if you've been quiet for a long time, love can still find its voice again." The crowd erupted in applause, but Ethan didn't clap right away. His throat felt too tight. Instead, he stood, his heart pounding as he looked at his daughter with unmasked pride and then at Maya, whose tearful smile told him she'd seen it too. When the play ended, chaos filled the hall, children laughing, parents cheering, teachers congratulating, but Ethan moved with one focus. He made his way through the crowd, his eyes locked on the woman standing by the exit. Maya turned as he approached, emotion flickering across her face. "You came," she whispered. "I wouldn't have missed it," he said softly. "Neither should you have." "I didn't want to cause a scene," she murmured, her voice trembling. He smiled faintly. "Then let's cause one together." Before she could respond, Lila's small voice called out, "Miss Maya." The girl came running, crown slipping sideways, her face glowing with joy. "Did you see me? Did I do okay?" Maya knelt, pulling her into her arms. "You were perfect, sweetheart. Absolutely perfect." Ethan watched them, emotion tightening his chest again. And then, in front of everyone's parents, teachers, and all the same people who once whispered behind their backs, he knelt beside them both. "Maya," he said quietly, "I used to think pretending was just a way to avoid pain. But now, I know. Sometimes pretending is the only way love finds its way back into our lives. You pretended to be her mom and somehow, you became family." Maya's breath caught. "Ethan." He took her hand gently, his eyes earnest. "You don't have to keep pretending anymore. Stay. Not as an act, not as a favor, but because you're a part of us now." The audience, still lingering, watched silently, some in shock, some smiling softly. Even the principal wiped her eyes discreetly. Leela, caught between them, whispered the words that broke the last of the silence. "Does that mean we're a family now?" Ethan looked at Maya, and she looked at him. There were no grand declarations, No promises sealed by diamonds. Just a quiet nod, a shared understanding, and tears that said everything words couldn't. Yes, sweetheart, Maya whispered, kissing Leela's forehead. We're a family now. The crowd began clapping again, this time not for the play, but for the story that had unfolded before their eyes. Not a fairy tale, but something real, something tender and raw and human. That night, as they walked out into the cool air, Leela holding both their hands, the stars shimmered like confetti scattered across the sky. For the first time in years, Ethan didn't feel the weight of loneliness pressing down on him. Instead, he felt light dash free. Maya looked up at him, smiling softly. You know, it's funny, she said. It all started with one small question. He smiled back, and a whisper that changed everything. They walked on in silence, the sound of Lila's laughter echoing down the street, pure, unbroken, endless, because love had finally found its way home. Moral: sometimes, the roles we pretend to play become the ones we're meant to live. Love doesn't always arrive with perfection. It arrives when two broken hearts decide to heal together. The end.